All right, so let's talk about the main critical elements that your scope of work needs to have in order for it to be effective. Okay? The scope of work, there's 7 main things. We'll talk about this in detail that your scopes of work should have in order for this to be successful. Again, this is not our opinions. This is based on thousands of projects, lots of research, and these are the main things we found that are most successful. So let's go through and talk about these. The first one is detailed requirements. Now, by the way, at the end, if you drop a business card, I'll be glad to give you all these slides and everything like that, so just quick commercial break on that. So if you want that, just drop me a note. Okay, so detailed requirements. So what these are is really a definition of the future state of where you would like this project or contract to be at. So in 3 to 5 years from now, what would you like to see things operating at? Now there's differences between mandatory requirements and like haves or would be nice to have type things. So you need to spend time with your in-group that's actually getting this project, focus on what do they actually need to have at the end of the day and what does this look like? Which is different from, well, it'd be nice if we could do this, but it's not an actual requirement. Understand the difference between requirements and nice haves is really important for a good quality scope of work. It needs to be organized. So I would use bullet points and just list these out here, right? Organized by sections, major categories, and where appropriate, attach major exhibits to the scope of work. So here's an overview of what this is. See Exhibit 1 for more details about what this is like. Now, why do you want our RFPs organized so well? I mean, if you're a vendor responding to this RFP, you don't want to spend their time trying to figure out what they have to fill out and what they need to do. What we want them to do is be spending time thinking about our project and contract instead of trying to deal with all these things that we may not understand, right? So have it organized. That's just a good business practice. Okay, second thing is a high-level summary of what the project is. Now, I find that most organizations don't do this. And what this is what are you looking to procure at a high level? This is literally 1 to 2 paragraphs about what do you want. Put it in layman's terms so that anyone that doesn't know a whole lot about the project would understand what you're talking about. I have seen so many vendors that come to say, I mean, we looked at this project, we're not going to respond to it because at the end of the day, we don't really know what they're asking for. So literally, if you spend the time to put together just a little bit of information at a high level, what you're looking at, that can do leaps and bounds for your projects. Again, avoid technical language, details, and this high-level summary is just get to what are we looking at for this. Third part of this is goals and objectives, right? So it's important to help the vendors understand that the driving force behind this and why you're actually doing this project. So why are you having this contract procured in the first place? What's going on to have you to do this? Just some background information about what this is can give tremendous insight to the industry about why you're doing this in the first place. Talk to them about what problems you're facing and just very simply lay that out. Right? Major goals, expectations, objectives. And again, if I would aim for about 3 to 5 things as to why you're doing this contract. This could be construction, this could be janitorial, this could be other business services. Whatever you're looking at, I would include 3 to 5 things about why you're doing this in the first place, right? So some examples, we want to provide food, ensure customers are happy, right, obviously. Roofing. Now, it's interesting about roofing is kind of an interesting thing. Why the most of the time do we install a new roof system? It's leaking, yeah. So why are we doing this project? There's water on my head in my computer, and I don't like that. So we need to put on a new roof on, right? And this really illustrates that because we had a project like that. The scope of work was stop the water from leaking in our building, right? Now, what's interesting here is that they provided current conditions about what their job site is. So their scope of work was, actually what it was is install a new roof system. And because here we're actually trying to use expertise of the industry, here's what the contractors came back and said. They said, we'll install your new roof, not a problem. But also, a lot of your leaks are coming from things that are not tied to the roof. Broken glass, masonry that's messed up, other issues related to the site. So for an additional time and money, we'll fix the roof, but also we'll fix all these other issues that will guarantee a leak-free facility, right? There's a fly flying around, so I'm not a crazy person. Okay. All right. So again, if we actually use expertise and looking at current conditions, this is a really good way to do that. Okay, number 4, schedule requirements. If you have a drop-dead date for when this project needs to be done, tell that to the industry. If you have a date when you would like it to start, provide that. If there's dates when they can't start work, provide all that information. And again, it's not difficult to do some of this stuff, but sometimes we just forget to do it. Right? So just take a little bit of time to think about what this does. Has, again, a lot of benefits as we go forward on our projects. Right? Number 5, budget requirements. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about our budgets as to what this should look like for us. Right? Okay, here's a question for everybody. Should you issue the budget as part of your scope of work or your RFP? Who says yes? Raise them high. Who says we should issue the budget? Okay. Who says no? Okay. Who says, I don't know what's going on here, maybe? Okay. Okay, you ready for this? Yes. I mean, look at that font size. That's huge. You should absolutely issue the budget. 100%. And the reason why I want to do this, again, I'm not crazy, all right? The reason why you're going to do this is because this relates to the industry very real constraints you have about your project. Okay? Let's take a look at this a little bit further here. The budget is the single most important scope of work descriptors. It's absolutely crucial to have that, right? It clarifies your technical scope. In other words, what you're able to do or not do. Now, the concerns with that, well, here's an example of this. So this is an actual project here. This is, the scope of work for this project was to hire an architect and engineer to develop a data center, right? That's what they're going to do. And the owner at the time said, well, we asked him, well, what's your budget for that? You should tell the industry. And the owner said, we're not going to do that because we don't trust anybody. They're just going to inflate their prices. We're not going to do it. They said, okay, we don't recommend that, but fine. Okay. So here's what happened. So 4 firms attended the site walk, and 2 of those firms submitted their proposal. Yeah.
Same time.
Okay, so the question here is when you have the walkthrough, you bring one at a time, all the vendors, you bring them one at a time, or you bring them all together. I would have an open meeting. If you want to schedule separate meetings after the fact, that would be fine too, but it just depends on what the scope of work is and things like that. But I would have an overall meeting to present the overall high-level view of the project itself here, right? So let's go through this example, and I want to illustrate what the value is in providing the budget for this. So 4 firms attended the site walk. 2 of those companies submitted their cost to do the work. Both firms decide a facility that's way over the budget. Now, do the firms know it's over budget? Who knows it's over budget? The owner, because they know the budget, which they didn't tell to the industry. Okay? So the owner selects one firm and has them design a project, and they still they don't trust the vendors, and they tell them, well, our budget is somewhere between $1 million and $5 million. We said, provide your budgets. You really should do that. Say, well, okay, we're still kind of leery here. We're not going to do that. So they gave a range. Now, what do you think this firm came back as for their cost? Yes, $4.5 million. Okay, so what's the owner say to them? Actually, our budget's $1.5 million. Now think about this. Think about it. Had they provided their budget up front, how many firms would have proposed? We have no idea, but maybe 4, right? That's really important information. Secondly, how much time was wasted going back and forth, redesigning and designing, because they don't know what the actual budget is for that, right? Yeah? Okay, so the question is, well, people are still going to inflate their costs because if we have the budget, then they know there's money left on the table to provide that. Okay, I'm going to answer your question, I promise. I absolutely will answer because it all ties together here. We did some research. We found that most of the time, 250 RFPs, the budget was at $220 million. Average proposal was below that price. So from a research standpoint, it appears that that's not always true. Let's take a look at this further here. So if you have your budget, provide it. Let me get to this slide. Okay, here we go. The reason why you should provide your budget is this. Let's say our budget number is this amount, right? Our concerns for why we don't provide the budget is that, well, companies will come in and they'll inflate their price, right? My question for that is, how often do you have more money than you actually need? In other words, most of the time your budget is what? Is less than what you actually need to do that. So there's really not a whole lot of money left on the table. The second thing we think about is, well, what if our budget is actually insufficient then? Who's the best person to identify that you don't have enough money here and here's how to fix it? Who's most likely going to be able to help us with that problem? The experts. And the only way they can help you is if what? They have the budget. Now, address this concern of, well, they might still artificially inflate their prices because we have the number for that. Here's what I've seen that just doesn't happen unless there's collusion. If there's collusion going on, that's a separate discussion we'll have down at Starbucks, right? But for what we're talking about here, in most situations, that doesn't happen. The reason why is this. If we have a budget, and let's say our budget is $1 million. Somebody comes in here and say, well, the project only costs us $800,000, but because I know their budget's $1 million, I'm going to propose $900,000. So company one says, I'm going to bid $900,000. Company two looks at the project, they know the budget, they know the work also costs $800,000. They decide, well, you know what, I'm going to put in my bid at $850,000. What happens to company two when they put in a bid at $850,000? Are they more competitive or less competitive? More competitive. So what does firm one think about that? They know that these other companies, they know that these other companies are also going to play that same game. So therefore, they don't have as much incentive to artificially inflate their prices because they know that all the other companies are trying to be competitive with this. So the answer, in my opinion, as to whether you should provide your budget is absolutely yes, because there's so much benefit to be gained by providing that number. If we're actually trying to hire experts that know what they're doing to actually help us improve our operations on our sites, then we have to provide that budget information for them. Now, I skipped over this slide here as to what this should actually look like. So if you have a budget, then provide that number. If there's a specific budget tied to construction, say exactly what that is. Now, if you don't have a budget, because sometimes we don't exactly know, perhaps you have estimated spend. So we anticipate spending, $7 million of funding per year to support, this is a software licensing situation. And on this bottom one, if you have historical spend, provide that as well. Now, the answer to the last part of your question was about contingency and how does that relate into the budget. What I would do is provide as much transparency as possible, right? Or if you want to hold back contingency from an owner's perspective, then just take that out of the budget. So let's say you have $1 million and you have a 10% contingency. So now the actual budget that the industry has to work with is $900,000. That's what I would do. Be very transparent about, providing all this information. Now we have a fun white paper. I should have put this on the slides that it's more details about this as to whether you should issue the budget or not. And so if you want to take this white paper, get to your boss and explain how this works, we have that. Drop me a note and I'll be glad to send that to you. So for your budgets, yes, provide it. There's a lot of benefits to actually providing that. Okay, fifth thing here is, sixth thing here is unique considerations. Is there anything unique about this job site that the industry should know about in terms of anything that may be different from this type of site? I have a project right now where this project here is like developing a new site basically. And the only way you get to site is there's 4 access points, and every single access point to the job site is controlled by somebody else. And so from the contractors trying to do work on the site, the only way they get to site is they have to go through like all the security stuff to get to the job site. That's really unique. It's a very unique part of how this job is done. So if there's things that are really unique about your site, you need to provide this, to the industry. Anything that could pose a surprise or a challenge, again, this is the types of things we provide in that scope of work. And lastly is current conditions. In my opinion, current conditions is probably one of the easiest things to do, but most oftenly is overlooked. And what current conditions do is provide a basis for where we're going on our project. I mean, if you're going on a road trip, you have to start somewhere, and those current conditions describe where we're currently at. Now, these current conditions don't need to be accurate. I mean, they should, but do the best you can to put all this information together. Because again, if we're trying to plan a map out as to where we're going, we have to know where to start at. So current conditions is a great way to do that.